3 years after graduation, 5 of us met for dinner. It was the first time we'd all been together since Stanford. The restaurant overlooked San Francisco Bay. The city lights reflected across the water like thousands of tiny possibilities. Back in college, we'd imagined we'd all become successful together. Now, we had become successful differently. Arjun arrived first. He looked exhausted and happier than I'd ever seen him. I quit. You quit? My startup. You just joined. I know. He laughed. So I started another one. Typical Arjun. Priya arrived next. She was carrying 2 books and looked exactly like someone who belonged in a university. I'm finishing my PhD. And then, I want to teach. You always wanted that. She smiled. I still do. Raghav surprised all of us. He had left engineering completely. What are you doing now? He grinned. I'm writing music. Silence, then laughter. You mean as a hobby? No. As my career. He wasn't joking. Ananya had joined a boutique consulting firm. She traveled constantly, loved solving business problems, couldn't imagine staying in one company for more than a few years. Then everyone looked at me. What about you? I smiled. I'm still at Orion. Promotion? Yes. Happy? I think so. I heard myself say those words. I think so. Not, I am. At some point, Priya asked the question that changed the evening. So, which one of us made the right decision? Nobody answered. Because nobody could. Arjun wasn't wrong. Neither was Priya. Neither was Raghav. Neither was Ananya. Neither was I. We had simply built different lives. That realization stayed with me all the way home. Careers aren't ladders. They're architectures. The next weekend, I drew 5 different paths in my notebook. Corporate leadership, entrepreneurship, academia, creative careers, portfolio careers. Each one optimized something different. Freedom, security, impact, creativity, income, purpose. For the first time, I asked myself a question no one had ever asked me. What kind of life am I trying to build? Not, what job do I want? Not, what title do I want? Life. The answer took months. Around the same time, social media became impossible to ignore. Every day, someone announced a promotion. Another startup raised millions. Another friend bought a house. Another celebrated an award. Everyone looked successful. Comparison became effortless. One evening, I caught myself feeling behind. Behind whom? I wasn't sure. I was comparing my life to people pursuing completely different destinations. It made no sense. Yet I was doing it anyway. That night, I wrote another page in my notebook. At the top, I wrote, Inherited scorecard. Good grades, good university, good company, good title, good salary, good retirement. I stared at the list. None of those goals were wrong, but I suddenly realized none of them had originated with me. I'd inherited them. Parents, teachers, society, recruiters, LinkedIn, without noticing. I'd been living someone else's definition of success. The next page looked very different. My scorecard. Learn continuously, build meaningful work, lead people, protect my health, create opportunities for others, never stop reinventing myself, leave something behind that outlives me. That page became one of the most important pages in the notebook, because from that day forward, every major decision became easier. Not easier because the choices disappeared. Easier because I finally knew what I was optimizing for. Years later, when younger colleagues asked me for career advice, they expected me to recommend industries or companies. Instead, I asked them one question. What would 90-year-old you thank today's you for doing? The room always became quiet because 90-year-old you doesn't care about your job title. 90-year-old you remembers relationships, growth, courage, health, family, purpose, impact. That question eventually became my compass. Every promotion, every career change, every difficult decision, every reinvention, I simply asked, which choice moves me closer to the person I want to become? Not, which choice impresses other people? Looking back now, I don't believe careers are discovered. I believe they are designed. One decision at a time. One season at a time. One reinvention at a time. That dinner with 4 friends taught me something I wish every graduate could hear. There isn't one perfect career. There is only the career that is most aligned with your values, your strengths, and the life you hope to build. The moment I stopped chasing someone else's definition of success, I finally began building my own. And that decision became the foundation for everything that followed. The first promotion felt wonderful. For exactly 2 weeks. On Friday afternoon, my manager announced the news during our team meeting. Congratulations, Maya. Beginning next month, you'll be leading the Advanced Systems Integration team. The room erupted in applause. People shook my hand. My parents cried when I called them. Friends took me out to dinner. For a brief moment, I felt as if I had finally arrived. Then Monday came, and I realized something terrifying. I had no idea how to do my new job. The strange thing about promotions is that they reward you for mastering yesterday's challenges, then immediately ask you to solve tomorrow's. The skills that made me a successful engineer were suddenly insufficient. No one expected me to write the most elegant code anymore. Instead, they expected me to build a team that could. They expected me to resolve conflict, to negotiate priorities, to coach young engineers, to explain technical decisions to executives who didn't speak the language of technology. Every day felt like the first day of school. Only this time, there wasn't a syllabus. One afternoon, I found myself staring at a whiteboard covered with project timelines. My team had missed 2 deadlines. One engineer wasn't speaking to another. Marketing wanted features we couldn't deliver. Sales had promised customers something that had never been discussed with engineering. I stood there wondering, how did my life become so complicated? David happened to walk past my office. He looked at the whiteboard, smiled knowingly, and stepped inside. Looks familiar. I thought getting promoted meant I'd finally know what I was doing. He laughed. I've been promoted 7 times. And I've never known what I was doing on the first day. I laughed with him. Then he pointed toward the whiteboard. You're trying to solve today's problems. Isn't that my job? No. He picked up a marker and drew a spiral. Your real job is becoming the person who can solve tomorrow's problems. He placed the marker down. Never confuse your current job with your future education. That sentence became another page in my notebook. Every promotion requires a new education. Years later, it would become one of the foundations of what I would call the 10 learning cycles trademark. At the time, I simply thought I needed to read more books. I had no idea I was discovering the operating system for an entire career. I began noticing a pattern. Every few years, my life changed. Not because I wanted it to, because the world did. The engineer became a communicator. The communicator became a team leader. The team leader became a strategist. The strategist became a business executive. Each version of Maya required a completely different set of skills. The strange part was that every new version required me to become a beginner again. At first, I hated that feeling. I had spent years becoming an expert. Why would I willingly become a novice? Then I realized, beginners ask better questions. Experts often defend old answers. One Saturday morning, I drove back to Stanford. The campus looked exactly as I remembered. Students hurried between lectures carrying backpacks far heavier than mine had ever felt. I wandered into the engineering library and found the table where I had spent countless nights preparing for exams. I sat there for nearly an hour. Nothing had changed, except me. I looked around and suddenly understood something. University had never been the end of my education. It had simply been the first chapter. Everything important I had learned during the previous 3 years: leadership, communication, decision-making, influence, resilience, hadn't been taught inside these classrooms. They had been learned by living. Driving home, I made myself a promise. I would never again wait for someone else to teach me. No manager, no university, no company. My education was now my responsibility. That evening, I created something I called my learning calendar. Every quarter, I would master one completely new skill. Some were directly related to work, negotiation, public speaking, finance. Others seemed unrelated: behavioral psychology, storytelling, design thinking, history, writing. Each new subject changed how I saw the world. And strangely, every one of them eventually made me a better leader. Around that time, Orion hired a young engineer named Ethan. He reminded me of myself: brilliant, quiet, always the first to solve technical problems. One afternoon, he walked into my office looking discouraged. "I don't think I'm leadership material." I smiled. "Why?" "I'm not naturally charismatic. I don't enjoy politics. I just like solving problems." His words sounded painfully familiar. I opened my notebook and showed him the very first page. Things Stanford never taught me. He laughed. "You still carry that?" "Every day." I pointed to the worn pages. "Everything that changed my career started in this notebook." He turned another page, then another. "What is all this?" "My education." "But none of this is technical?" "Exactly." He looked confused. I smiled. "Ethan, technical skills get you into the room. What keeps you in the room?" "The ability to keep learning." Several months later, Ethan stopped by again. This time, he was smiling. "I took your advice." "What advice?" "I joined Toastmasters." I laughed. "The engineer?" "The terrified engineer." "How was it?" "Horrible." We both laughed. I've never been so nervous. But I'm going back next week. That was the moment I realized learning isn't about confidence. It's about courage. Confidence usually arrives later. Years passed. The learning calendar continued. Every promotion demanded another learning cycle. Every challenge forced another reinvention. Eventually, I stopped thinking of my career as one long climb. Instead, I saw it as 10 distinct chapters. Each chapter began exactly the same way: with uncertainty, with curiosity, with the willingness to become a beginner again. The pattern became so clear that I finally gave it a name: the 10 Learning Cycles trademark. Not because there were literally 10, because a meaningful career isn't built on a single education. It's built on repeated transformation. Every cycle followed the same rhythm: learn, practice, fail, reflect, improve, teach. Then begin again. Looking back now, I can remember each learning cycle far more clearly than any promotion. I remember the excitement of discovering behavioral science, the discomfort of my first public speech, the embarrassment of asking basic financial questions in executive meetings, the thrill of understanding strategy for the first time. Every one of those moments stretched my identity. Everyone prepared me for opportunities I couldn't yet imagine. Most people think careers are built through promotions. I don't. I think they're built through learning. Promotions simply reveal what your learning has already made possible. Near the end of that year, David and I had one last conversation before he retired. We walked through the same garden where, years earlier, he had asked me who I wanted to become. He stopped beneath an old oak tree. "Maya, do you know why some people have 40-year careers while others stop growing after 10? I thought for a moment. "They're smarter?" He smiled. "No." "They're luckier?" "No." He looked up at the branches stretching toward the sky. They remain students. Forever? Forever. Then he said something I wrote immediately into my notebook. The day you believe you've finished learning, your career quietly begins retiring before you do. I carried those words with me for the next 40 years, and every time the world changed. When industries shifted, when technology advanced, when artificial intelligence transformed work, I came back to the same simple decision: become a beginner. Again. Because every new beginning was the doorway to another extraordinary chapter of my work span. There was a time when I believed the biggest obstacles in my career were outside of me. The wrong manager, the wrong project, the wrong company, the wrong economy, the wrong timing. If only those things changed, I thought, my career would move forward. I was wrong. The biggest obstacles were traveling with me every morning. They sat beside me in meetings. They whispered during presentations. They followed me home after difficult days. They were invisible, yet they felt incredibly real. Years later, I would call them the monkeys I carried, not because they were imaginary, because they clung to me so tightly that I stopped noticing they were there. The first monkey arrived after my performance review. 3 out of 5. Objectively, it wasn't a disaster. Emotionally, it became part of my identity. Whenever someone asked for volunteers to present to senior leadership, I hesitated. When an executive challenged one of my ideas, I immediately assumed I was wrong. When opportunities appeared, I found reasons why someone else was probably better qualified. No one else knew. From the outside, I looked confident. Inside, a quiet voice repeated the same sentence. You're not as capable as they think. That sentence became background music, so constant that eventually I stopped hearing it. I simply believed it. About 18 months later, Sarah stopped me after a project review. Maya, do you have a minute? We walked toward the campus cafe. She ordered coffee. I ordered tea. She didn't say anything for a while. Finally, she looked at me. Why don't you speak up in executive meetings? The question caught me off guard. I do. No. You answer questions. But you almost never start the conversation. I stared into my tea. I guess I searched for the right words. I'm afraid I'll say something wrong. Sarah smiled gently. You know what's interesting? What? Everyone else in those meetings thinks exactly the same thing. I laughed. No, they don't. They absolutely do. She leaned forward. Confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's speaking before fear has finished talking. That sentence stayed with me for weeks. Then one Saturday morning, I attended a leadership workshop. The facilitator walked onto the stage carrying a stuffed toy monkey. The audience laughed. He placed it on his shoulder. This, he said, is what fear looks like. Then he asked for volunteers. Each person described something holding them back. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of criticism, fear of looking foolish, fear of changing careers. Every time someone spoke, he handed them another toy monkey. Soon, one volunteer had 6 monkeys hanging from his arms. The audience laughed again. Then the facilitator became serious. The remarkable thing about monkeys, he said, is that they get heavier the longer you carry them. Something inside me shifted. I wasn't carrying one monkey. I was carrying several. That night, I opened my notebook. Across 2 blank pages, I wrote a title, The Monkeys I Carry. Then I made a list. Fear of failure. If I try something new, I'll probably fail. Imposter syndrome. Sooner or later, everyone will discover I don't belong. Perfectionism. If it isn't perfect, it isn't good enough. People-pleasing. If everyone is happy with me, I'll be safe. Comparison. Everyone else seems further ahead. Comfort. Maybe I should just stay where I am. I stared at the list. Seeing those words on paper was strangely liberating. For the first time, my fears had names. And once something has a name, it becomes easier to challenge. Over the next few months, I made a simple decision. Every time I noticed one of my monkeys speaking, I would answer it. The first opportunity came sooner than expected. Our vice president asked if anyone wanted to present our quarterly innovation strategy. The old Maya immediately thought, someone more experienced should do it. Then I caught myself. There was the monkey. Fear of looking foolish. I took a deep breath. I'd be happy to. The room became quiet. Afterward, I walked back to my desk, convinced I had made a terrible mistake. For 2 weeks, I prepared obsessively. When presentation day arrived, my hands shook. My heart raced. Halfway through the presentation, one executive interrupted me. The old monkey whispered, "See? You're failing." Instead of panicking, I paused. "That's a great question," I said. "Let's explore it together." The conversation became one of the best meetings I'd ever led. When it ended, David caught up with me in the hallway. "You looked nervous." I was terrified. He smiled. "No. You looked courageous." I had never thought about the difference. One monkey disappeared. Not because it died, because I stopped feeding it. Unfortunately, monkeys rarely travel alone. A few years later, another one arrived. Success. Yes. Success became one of the heaviest monkeys I ever carried. After several promotions, people started introducing me as an expert. I enjoyed hearing that. More than I should have. Without realizing it, I began protecting my reputation instead of expanding my capabilities. I accepted assignments I already knew how to do. I avoided projects where I might struggle. I stopped asking beginners questions. One afternoon, David noticed. "You've become careful." "Is that bad?" "It depends." "On what?" "Are you protecting your future? Or protecting your image?" His words landed hard. Success had quietly become another cage. Not long afterward, the company announced a major reorganization. Entire departments disappeared. New technologies replaced familiar systems. Some of my colleagues spent months complaining. Others left. A few reinvented themselves. Watching them, I realized there were really two kinds of professionals. Those who carried yesterday, and those willing to put it down. That evening, I added another page to the notebook. The monkey of identity. I am an engineer. I am a manager. I am an executive. Those labels felt comforting. Until the world changed. The more tightly we hold our identity, the harder reinvention becomes. Years later, when artificial intelligence arrived, I watched the same pattern repeat. Some professionals insisted their old expertise would always matter. Others became curious. The curious people learned. The fearful people defended. The technology wasn't the real difference. The monkeys were. One day, a young engineer named Sophia knocked on my office door. She looked exactly as I had looked years earlier. "I don't think I'm ready." "For what?" "The promotion." "Why?" "What if I fail?" I smiled. "Can I tell you a secret?" She nodded. "I've never accepted a promotion I felt completely ready for." "You haven't?" "No." "Then why did you accept them?" "Because growth usually arrives disguised as responsibility." She laughed. "So you were scared too?" "Every single time." I reached into my desk drawer. Inside was the notebook. Its pages had become yellow with age. I showed her the list. The monkeys I carry. She read it quietly. Then she looked at me. "You still have these?" I smiled. "Some of them." "What do you do?" I acknowledge them. And then, I keep walking. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in my office. The sun was setting behind the city skyline. I thought about the young woman who had once believed confidence came first. She had been wrong. Confidence had never arrived before courage. It always arrived afterward. Every meaningful chapter of my career had begun with uncertainty. Every promotion, every reinvention, every new learning cycle, every leap into the unknown. None of them started with confidence. They started with courage. Today, when people ask me what the greatest obstacle in my career was, they expect me to mention competition, technology, economic downturns, artificial intelligence. I don't. The greatest obstacle I ever faced was believing the voice inside my head more than the possibilities in front of me. The world didn't change when my monkeys disappeared. The world changed because I stopped letting them decide where I could go. I still carry some of them. Perhaps I always will. The difference is, they no longer carry me. As I locked my office that evening, I remembered something David had once told me beneath the old oak tree. The goal isn't to become fearless. He had smiled before continuing. The goal is to become someone whose purpose is bigger than fear. I finally understood what he meant, because somewhere between that disappointing performance review and the leader I was becoming, I had stopped trying to prove I was enough. I had started trying to help others believe that they were, and somehow, that made my own monkeys a little quieter. The next morning, another challenge would arrive, another learning cycle, another opportunity to begin again. This time, I walked toward it with open hands instead of clenched fists, ready to leave another monkey behind.